Hi, I'm Tom, and in this Revit tutorial, I will show you how to create interior elevation with not only colors, but also with textures. You can see that here I've got some nice tile texture and also this wood texture. So we will go from standard interior elevation to these beauty interior elevation. So let's get started in my project where I have already my interior elevations created. And the other prerequisite for this is that I have already all my materials applied also with textures. I will not show how to create materials in this tutorial. So if I want to have this elevation, I will open it here independently. If I want to have this elevation with colors, I can change the visual style of this elevation, and you may know that you have shaded, which has colors but not textures. Consistent colors also have colors but not textures. And then you have realistic, which has textures. So it may seem like a straightforward job, but there's a lot of things that we will have to set up here. First, you can choose to show shadows on or off, but for these orthogonal elevations, usually the shadows for the interior elevations are not very useful because they show the shadows from the ceiling, so the shadows don't really make sense. So I want to have those shadows turned off. Another thing that we want to set up are these lines, which when we go to the display options and show graphic display options, we want to use smooth lines with anti-aliasing. When we apply it, the lines will be kind of softer and they won't be as sharp, and it will be much nicer for your eye. What we also need to set up is the brightness, the lighting. So when we take a look at the lighting, you can see that there's sun, ambient light, and shadows. We are not using shadows, so this doesn't matter to us because we are using interior elevations. Ambient lights also don't change anything because we are not using them. What changes the lighting for us is the sun. So when we switch it to 0, you can see that there's no light, no sun, sorry. And when we switch it to 80, it's very bright. I usually leave the sun at 30 or 20, and I change the brightness of the elevation in a different way, which I will come back to later. So now we can leave it at 30. And what's important is that you can see that now the sun is giving the elevation a bit yellowish tint because sunshine is yellow. So the more intense the sun is, the more yellowish tint the elevation has. When we turn off the sun completely, the view has no red tint. So I will set the sun to 20. What you might be tempted is to change the sun setting, and actually I will show it with the shadows on. When we go to the graphic display options, lighting, this sun setting you can change from where the sun shines. So when I use this setting from top left, it changes the direction from which the sun shines. But since we are not using shadows, this doesn't matter to us in interior elevation. By the way, to get to this graphic display options, I will use the shortcut GD. So I type GD and it opens this window. So back to the lighting. We don't have to mess with the sun setting in our interior elevation. And the way I change the brightness of my elevations is through this realistic part, because I changed the exposure. I don't use the automatic, I change it to manual, and here I can set whether the view will be darker or brighter. So now it was set up automatically to 14, When I change it to 13, you can see that it's much brighter. If I would go to 10, it would be very, very, very bright. And if I go to 15, then it will be very dark. So you have to change it by just a little increment. So let's say 13.8. And this is how I want my brightness to be. Okay, now let's talk again about the colors. I told you that the sun gives the elevation a reddish tint, and you can see here that the ceramic tile, the texture has this tint, and here it's a bit more reddish. So how can I change this? When I go to graphic display options again, in the realistic, what I do is use this color correction. And here I can change highlights, shadows, saturation, which I usually don't mess with. Sometimes I lower the saturation, but what I use is changing this white point. When 6500 is quite reddish, and when I change it to lower values, so let's see 5000, it will be more bluish. Okay, so now you can see it's a lot more blue. When I change it from 6500, which was original, to 7000, it's more reddish. So I will change it, let's say, to 5800. And you have to kind of wing it. You have to check how it looks compared to what you want it to look. It will never be perfect because it's using the photographic exposure, but you want to have as close to this color as possible. So let's say I will change the color correction to 5700. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's say this looks the same tint. Now let's create color in this elevation 1B. So I will open it and change the visual style to realistic. And you can see problem show up here. The thing is that this mirror material in this realistic mode in orthogonal views shows as a very, very dark black material. So we will have to change it because it's not usable. And when you have a view where there's something really, really dark and then something light like our tiles, when you have automatic exposure on, it tries to blend between these two, and it makes it so that none of the black or the white are visible properly. So when we go to our graphic display and we go to realistic, you can see that exposure is automatic. When we change it to manual and set 14, or we had it previously, I think 13.7, then you will see that it's set up properly, but the mirror is black. And how will we solve this? We have to change the material, because when I go to edit type and I go to this mirror material, it's using the mirror material, which is nice for renderings, but when you use it in this orthogonal view, it doesn't work. So we have to create a new material. I will rename it mirror 2D views. And in the appearance, I will name this appearance again mirror into the views, because it will show this appearance. And I will change the glossiness to 0, and I will change the color to some bright, let's change it like this, let's say this color. And Now let's see how the mirror looks. So it's too green, but yeah, let's make it more bluish. Okay, let's say I like this view. So the problem is that if I use this material, it won't show as a mirror if I would render this scene. But for these 2D orthogonal views, I have to set up mirror like this. So now let's go to this view, and again I could apply the realistic display options and set it all up in here, but I don't want to do this for every view, so I can go to, because you can see that the tint here is again different, and I want to have the tint of the tiles and other colors the same. So I will go to my elevation, the first one that I set up properly, and I will go to view and I will create template. I will create elevation texture. I will create this one. Okay. And now if I go to my elevation I can set the template so that it uses elevation textured. And you can see that everything is set up as was here. So I will also use the template for this one because you can see the tint is again different from this one. So I will set up elevation textured here and also here and here for these two. Okay, now you can see all of them have the similar tint, and I don't have to set up each individual one. I cannot use my template for my plan view, so I will open the plan view and again change to realistic, and here again I have to set up smooth lines. I will set up lighting, too much sun, let's say 20. It's good to check how it looks because it will look different in plan view than what it looks in elevations. And now in realistic, I'll go to color correction, and I think we used 5800, and I think it looks a bit darkish. Let's see here. Yeah, we can change the lighting, and oh sorry, realistic. Yeah, we didn't set up the exposure, so let's set it up to 13.8. And I think I can leave it at 14. Oh, sorry. I will set it up to 13.6. Yeah, let's maybe do 13.4. Yeah, this looks okay. We have to set up different exposure to elevations and different exposure to the plan view. Regarding the brightness of the elevations, it's important to know that the brightness depends a little bit on how far the object or the wall from the cutting plane is. So when I take a look at this view, this elevation 1B, you can see that the cutting plane is here and I'm this far from the wall. If I move the cutting plane to right, you can see that it's becoming brighter. If I move it further from the wall, it will be becoming darker. You can see that when I move the cutting plane here, it changes the brightness just a little bit. So this is another thing that can change the brightness of the textures. What I also want to mention is here in my elevation 1D, I have a window, and through the window I can see outside. How do I set up the outside? First, I will turn on temporary view properties so I can change the view properties regardless of my template. And then I will hide temporarily this wall and this wall. And now you can see that the background is just white. If I didn't have the window here, it would be white. To set up background, I go to my graphic display options and I go to the background. Here you can see that it's set up to none. If I change it to sky, you can see that in these interior elevations, there would be just this blue color, which doesn't look too good. So usually I use gradient, and the gradient, I prefer to change it to a bit more, something a bit more dark than this one. So I change the middle one to this, and I also change the top one. You, in the interior elevation, you don't see the ground color. So I usually use something a bit more darker than the default one. And now you can see that I've changed the gradient. One thing that I want to warn you about when creating these elevations with colors is that you have to have your family set up properly so that they show in color. I have downloaded this faucet on BIM object, and it's a typical family, and it's set up properly even with the material. It has got the chrome material, so it should look okay even in our elevations. But when I load it into my project and I place it here, you can see that it shows white, even though it should be chrome. Why is that? And it shows white in the plan view and also in elevation view. And even if I change the material of this faucet, it's this material. Let's change the appearance to black. It still shows white, even in my plan view. Why is that? It's because lots of Revit families are set up that in this orthogonal view, in the elevation and in the plan view, they don't show the 3D object with the material, but they actually show, and I will show it on this faucet when I go to front elevation, and I go to preview visibility on, and I change the detail to fine. You can see when I click here in the elevation, it doesn't show 3D object, but detail items. And actually, it's usually modeled as a masking region. So then you cannot change the color of the masking region, and it always shows up white. So this is problem with some families, and you have to adjust them so that they then work in your elevations with textures and they show the proper material color. It can be sometimes quite tedious to adjust all of your families in the view. What is also sometimes problematic in these colored elevation views is that when you have something that is really bright, like white wall, or I will paint this wall with this quite bright white tiles, and you can see that it's kind of when you have got too much difference between brightness of the door and the wall, it's sometimes hard to get the exposure value properly so that it shows both of them as you want to, because here I would like to have this a bit brighter, and but then when I change the exposure to, let's say, 13.2, and then it's kind of overexposed here and it's underexposed at the corners. So this is kind of problematic, and You just have to play and try what fits the best. So these are the two obstacles that you will have to fight. Okay, so this is how you create interior elevation in color and with textures. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Smash that like button if you liked it, and take care.